Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining our event of the ICEF 2021 Pathway to Carbon Neutrality by 2050 with roadmap launching event. This event is hosted by the Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry, METI, and New Energy and Industrial Technology Development Organization, NEDO. My name is Takashi Wada, Executive Director of NEDO, and I am the moderator of this event today. To begin with, I would like to introduce a couple of today's highlights. It is very important, essential to foster the collaboration of each stakeholder to achieve the goal of carbon neutrality by 2050. Then the importance of industry, academia, and the government is working together to discuss details of the implementing issues against the climate change issues. The session one is comprised of the two keynote speeches from the government of Japan and ICEF chairs. The government of Japan will talk about how to aim for virtuous cycle of economy and environmental issues against the realization of carbon neutrality. Appropriate distance, or whilst eating or drinking or are medically exempt. Thank you for your work. Thank you for your attention. And then ICEF Steering Committee Chair, Mr. Tanaka, will deliver the keynote speech about the current ICEF initiative to combat climate change through the technological innovation. ICEF had previously drafted a roadmap for a transition to clean energy with the use of key technologies. And today, in session 2, we will have a launching event of the new ICEF roadmap for carbon mineralization. In addition to that, it is especially important to raise funds to help academia and industry to accelerate the development of cutting-edge, innovative and innovations and effectively promote international collaboration based on the understanding of the natural and regional diversity. So, in session 3, we will have the discussion among the various fields from academia, from government, and industry from the perspective of an international framework, as well as the industry, government, and academic. And so in this session, we have invited speakers from the CCUS Initiative of Clean Energy Ministerial and Columbia University, Tachi, and NEDO. Both of them are to deliver their respective presentations. I hope you enjoy this event. So I would like to now I would like to start session 1, keynote. First, Mr. Ryo Minami, Deputy Commissioner for International Policy on Carbon Neutrality and Director General for Evidence-Based Policy Making, METI Japan, will make a keynote speech. He will discuss how a virtuous cycle of economy and environment will help achieve carbon neutrality. Mr. Minami, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. I'm Ryo Minami, Deputy Commissioner and Director General for International Policy on Carbon Neutrality at METI. Thank you for coming to this seminar today. At COP26 here in Glasgow, important negotiations are underway. 1 month ago, in October, Japan held Tokyo Biyondo Zero Week. いいのかな？これあれだな。ここ？環境省じゃないね。 これで進めるときはこれでやるのね。Sorry. Tokyo Beyond Zero. So 1 month ago in October, Japan held Tokyo Beyond Zero Week. It is a series of 8 international conferences to discuss the measures to achieve global carbon neutrality. The ICEF and the RD20 are an important pillars of Tokyo Beyond Zero Week. I would now like to explain its significance. Last year, Japan declared the goal of achieving carbon neutrality by 2050. In order to achieve this goal, the Japanese government formulated the green grass strategy to mobilize all the possible measures. We are also determined to lead decarbonization globally by establishing innovative technologies through the 2 trillion yen Green Innovation Fund. It continuously supports the development of key technologies from R&D to demonstration stage over the next 10 years. Addressing climate change is a global challenge and requires international cooperation. Japan will facilitate disseminating the leading clean energy technologies, know-how, and measures to the world. 3 principles shape our international climate policy directions. Firstly, pathways. It is important to recognize that there are many different pathways towards a carbon neutral energy transition for each country. The most effective approach is to promote initiatives that are specific to the energy situation and the technological capabilities of each country. Secondly, innovation. In pursuing the energy transition, it is necessary to create various technological innovations through research and development in order to explore all types of energy and technologies. With such technological innovation, we can maximize energy efficiency and the use of renewable energy. We can combine various options such as next-generation renewable energy, hydrogen, ammonia, and CCUS carbon recycling. Thirdly, engagement. It is important for developed countries to engage in emerging countries, including the growing Asian region, to support the introduction of innovative technologies and the necessary policy frameworks, especially finance. In order to realize these 3 principles, it is important to bring together the wisdom of the world. For this reason, last year, Japan launched Tokyo Beyond Zero Week, a series of international conferences on energy and environment. These conferences will bring together a wide variety of stakeholders, including ministers, representatives from private companies, research institutes, and international organizations. This year, 8 international conferences were held during the week from October 4th to 8th. This includes the first Asian Green Growth Partnership Ministerial meeting, the first international conference on fuel ammonia, and the Hydrogen Energy Ministerial meeting, and the international conference on carbon recycling. During the week, participating experts and leaders had intensive discussions to determine solutions to achieving decarbonization and economic growth simultaneously. We call it a virtuous cycle of the economy and the environment. Each conference issued statements or reports to identify possible pathways to achieve the goal, as well as to confirm new or additional international cooperation. around 17,000 registered viewers participated from 90 countries. The ICEF and RD20 are important pillars of Tokyo Beyond Zero Week. The ICEF discussed innovation from the perspectives of policy, business, and individuals, as well as technologies such as negative emission technologies. This year, the young generation, who will lead the world in 2050, also participated in the discussions in each session. At RD20, the top executives of research institutes representing the G20 participated to discuss the deepening of R&D cooperation toward the realization of carbon neutrality. They also started new initiatives this year, establishing a task force to facilitate the creation of new international joint projects. After my speech, Mr. Tanaka, the chairman of the ICEF Steering Committee, Mr. Sandro from Columbia University, and Mr. Suzuki from Hitachi Limited will provide further detail regarding the important work that is taking place. The following seminar will feature a speech by Mr. Yoshino Akira, a Nobel laureate and director of Global Zero Emission Research Center, so please look forward to that. In conclusion, all of us are looking for concrete pathways that steadily guide us towards carbon neutrality. At the Tokyo Beyond Zero Week, sincere discussions were held to answer this question, and many options and possibilities were presented. COP26 Glasgow will be an important milestone, but we are still in the middle of a very long journey. Therefore, Japan will continue Tokyo Beyond Zero Week next year. We hope that more people, including all of you, will participate in this discussion. Thank you for your attention, and I hope you will enjoy this seminar. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Minami, for your excellent speech. It is very enlightened for us to promote the clean energy efforts from the various perspectives. So next, I would like to move on to the launching event of the ICEF new roadmap about carbon mineralization. Please let me introduce the moderator for this event, Mr. David Sandel. The inaugural fellow at the Center on Global Energy Policy at Columbia University and co-director of Energy and Environment Concentration at the School of International and Public Affairs at Columbia University. He has served for senior positions at the U.S. Department of State and Department of Energy. I would like to also introduce an excellent speaker for this session also, Dr. S. Juriel Friedman. He is a senior research scholar at the Center for Global Energy Policy at Columbia University. I would like to ask Mr. David Sandel to moderate this session too. Mr. Sandel, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Executive Director Wada. Thank you to NEDO for all of your work supporting decarbonization. And thank you, Deputy Commissioner Minami, for all of your leadership at METI and for your excellent speech today. I'm delighted to be here to release the 2021 ICEF Roadmap, which is on the topic of carbon mineralization. the ICEF conference supports an innovation roadmap. This is our 9th innovation roadmap. You can see the prior products here, and you can find all of them on the ICEF website. As you can see, in recent years, we've done work on biomass carbon removal and storage, or bikers, on the decarbonization of industrial heat, on direct air capture, and a number of other topics. This year, our topic is carbon mineralization, and it's been a privilege to work with an extremely distinguished group of experts on this topic who prepared this roadmap. One of them is with us today, has already been introduced, Dr. Friedman. In addition, our other co-authors include Roger Ains, Peter Kellerman, Colin McCormick, Ian Power, Brianna Schmidt, and Sasha Wilson. We've been working hard at this roadmap since last spring and are delighted to release it today. We released it in draft form at the ICEF conference in October, collected comments on it, and are now releasing the final version. Now, I have found that this is a topic that very few climate policy experts know much about. And so we're going to start with just some of the basics. What is carbon mineralization? As this slide says, it's a process in which carbon dioxide becomes bound in rocks as a solid mineral. This happens naturally at a slow rate as certain rocks are exposed to carbon dioxide, permanently removing roughly 0.3 gigatons of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere each year. And here you can see a basic schematic. Start with rocks that are rich in calcium or magnesium. Expose them to carbon dioxide, and they naturally turn into carbonate minerals, removing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, which is, of course, something we want to do from a climate change standpoint. So our question in this roadmap is there a way that that can be accelerated and enhanced to help fight climate change? This shows a basic diagram of the natural carbon mineralization process. This is sometimes called the slow carbon cycle. And as you can see here, volcanoes release CO2 into the atmosphere, combines with rain to form carbonic acid. Carbonic acid reacts with rocks. The carbon is carried by rivers to the ocean, where it reacts to form carbonate rocks, again removing that carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, but in very small quantities at a natural level and at a very slow rate. And then eventually, as part of the cycle, it comes up again through volcanoes. That's the natural carbon mineralization process. We believe carbon mineralization can help fight climate change. And it could help remove many tons of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere each year. There are two broad ways that this can happen. And we're going to talk more about this in a moment, but carbon mineralization can happen through a variety of different processes, but there are two broad categories. One of them is you can inject CO2-rich fluids into rock formations deep underground. And the second is you could expose crushed rocks on the Earth's surface to CO2 peri gases. One of these is called in situ, the other is called ex situ mineralization. Here is a map of geologic carbon mineralization resources, and this brings up an important point. Resources for this way of fighting climate change are spread all over the world. They're in many different countries in vast quantities. And with this, to discuss the specifics of a number of different techniques, I'm honored to turn the floor over to my colleague and friend, Dr. Julio Friedman.
Thank you so much, David. It is really a treat to be here and a treat to share this information with you from the ICEF roadmap. So let's get right into it. You can, in fact, just inject CO2 into rocks, and it will convert to minerals. We know because we've been doing this for a while. In fact, there's a project in Iceland called the CarbFix project that does exactly that. And essentially, the CO2 is injected, ideally into either basaltic or ultramafic rocks, ones that are getting very rich in calcium and magnesium. And in fact, the thermodynamics prefer this more stable form. When the rocks react with CO2, it releases as much heat as the combustion of natural gas. It is a very, very good reaction to see in nature. There's much that we don't know about this yet, but we do know that it can be done. And one of the questions that we have then is, can you make new fractures in the rocks to make it faster? Do the fractures naturally close up when they react? There's a handful of science to be done. But in fact, there are companies that are now proposing to do this either directly by taking CO2 from the air and injecting it, or by combining it with a system like direct air capture to concentrate the CO2 and accelerate the reactions. We don't know exactly what this will cost, and we don't know exactly whether or not this will work, but we do believe that in the good places in the world, you can probably get many gigatons of removal through this pathway. If you don't want to drill a well and you don't want to inject into the subsurface, there's some simpler things you can do. You can find the good rocks and grind them up. The reactions are slow, even if they are favored thermodynamically. One way you can make them faster is just with more reactive surface. So just grinding makes a lot of this fast. And in fact, we already see this in some mines, where the tailings from the operations of the mine react so quickly that black rocks turn white in a matter of weeks. They need some wetness, some moisture to moderate those reactions, but it works. And again, it's permanently bound in a very stable minimum energy phase. A main advantage, this is pretty easy. If you can find the good rocks, you can do this with a grinder. And in fact, you can take these same crushed rocks and put them on agricultural land and get enhanced uptake with the soils, and in some contexts, you can improve the quality of the soils doing this, getting multiple wins. Those kinds of co-benefits are just becoming understood. It is also the case that there are challenges with this. One of them is if you start moving rocks, it becomes expensive. Another one is that we don't quite have the monitoring that we would need in all contexts. If you're working in mine tailings, the monitoring is straightforward. If you're spreading these things on fields or in the ocean and letting nature do its work, it's harder to monitor, and we need additional pathways to understand this. Last but not least, sometimes these calcium, magnesium-rich minerals are rich in other metals that are hazardous. Nickel, cobalt, chromium, these kinds of things. And so you may want a cadmium, whatever it is. We don't quite know the environmental effects of this. So we need a research program to make sure that we don't create problems as we're trying to solve problems. In addition to just crushing these rocks, like I said, the mining and industrial waste piece is very, very interesting. And part of the reason why is because we've already done so much. There are mine tailings all over the world from these things, so there are pre-ground rocks that we could potentially use. And in fact, there is additional industrial wastes on top of the tailings that are of real interest. A particularly easy one, steel slag. When you make steel, there's waste products from it. They are essentially magnesium-rich and iron, calcium-rich minerals that react with CO2. And in fact, there's a company in China called Green Ore, which is trying to do exactly this. The same thing with fly ash, the same thing with certain kinds of fertilizer production. Byproducts from these industries are in fact an opportunity for mineralization and would bind CO2 in a permanent form from the air. It also solves a second problem, which is there are billions of tons of industrial waste lying around. We could kill two birds with one stone doing this. In some cases, managing these industrial waste provides a cost savings opportunity, and with it a revenue opportunity for the companies that act first. The volumes of this stuff are limited, but where there are large volumes you can move today. A particularly noteworthy country for this, China, where half the steel of the world is made. There are other kinds of industrial waste piles out there, fly ash, mine tailings that we've talked about. This is an opportunity to, again, manage environmental risks and remove this material and ameliorate it while at the same time removing CO2. A particularly interesting place where this can work, asbestos mines. Asbestos mines are rich in these minerals. You can potentially get rid of asbestos waste and mineralize it, again, for fairly low cost. There are certainly things we would want to know about that, but this is an opportunity which creates a basis for innovation. A completely different form of mineralization is turning CO2 into building materials. You can turn it into aggregate. You can turn it into cement. And again, there are companies out there that do this. In the United States, a company called Carbon Cure, another company called Carbon Built, both won the Carbon X Prize for turning CO2 into building materials. And in fact, this source of material, cement making, produces 8% of greenhouse gas emissions in the world. So there's an opportunity to actually fix the emissions from this problem while also making a better product that is stronger, while also binding CO2 in a permanently mineral phase. And there's multiple ways to do this, using CO2 to cure the concrete, making aggregate and adding it to the concrete, mixing CO2 and carbonation into it. In principle, you can combine this with other strategies like carbon capture on the cement making and lead to a fully carbon negative, carbon restorative cement and concrete industry. I wish that I could talk to you for another 20 hours about this stuff. I'm very excited about it. It's very interesting and there's a lot to learn and know. But rather than do that, I would just share some findings from the report and then turn it back to Dr. Sandalo for some recommendations. The key finding, if there's only one thing you get away from today's presentation, it's this. The mitigation potential is huge. We believe that the annualized potential for this alone is on the order of 10 gigatons a year. Very, very large. And the resource base for this is tens of trillions of tons. We're not going to run out of the rocks anytime soon. And it has the potential, therefore, to add to CO2 removal in a very valuable way. And we estimate that with strong policy support, we could get to a gigaton within the 2035 timeline. Another finding is that this has a lot of benefits and strengths. The mineral resource is effectively unlimited. It's all over the world in dozens of countries that want to do projects like this. And it is the most stable and most permanent form of CO2. Risk of return to the environment is effectively zero. And the chemical reactions that mineralize this do not require energy that makes it interesting from an operational standpoint. As with benefits, there are challenges and concerns. The key one is the kinetics. Natural carbonation is slow, so you need to do something to speed it up. Today, we only understand the distribution of these resources in a very coarse way. We have an understanding of the resource, but not the reserves. We need to do a better job of mapping the different mineral phases, their locations, their richness, and so forth, to really plan on a policy perspective. Right now, the commercial valuation for the things you make out of carbon dioxide, like cement and concrete, is pretty low. Aggregates sell for $10 a ton. Concrete sells for $100 a ton. This is not a high-value product. And so you cannot really bootstrap this enterprise on the revenues alone. Today, an important finding, this is completely absent from policy discussions. Carbon mineralization is not a compliance option in markets. It is not available for trading on the ETS. If you look at most nations' national plans, they do not have carbon mineralization there. That is a challenge. We also think that's an opportunity. A key finding, pilots. We don't need billions of dollars or trillions of dollars. We need a few tens of millions of dollars to kick this off. A few pilots will give us a sense for how much this would cost to make operational and where are good places to do it. It would also provide the technical foundation for standards of operation and environmental stewardship. One last finding that I want to leave with you is we made a comparison with another important engineered pathway, direct air capture, which was in fact the subject of our 2019 roadmap. And first of all, today these are very early stage technologies, and today they are both quite expensive. In both cases, there are real opportunities to reduce the costs swiftly. We believe that this can come down well below $100 a ton within a reasonable time frame. It can be deployed in lots of locations, and it shows considerable promise. Unlike the direct air capture process, though, this requires no energy inputs or very small energy inputs. And that's important to understand, and there may be additional benefits, for example, like the enhanced soil fertility I mentioned earlier. With that, I turn it over to the inaugural fellow of the Center on Global Energy Policy, Dr. Sandalo, to finish the recommendations.
Thank you, Julio. We offered 4 recommendations. The first is that Governments and companies should invest in research and development on carbon mineralization. That, building on what Dr. Friedman just said, we should immediately launch dozens of new pilot projects in different geographies around the world and focus on increasing the speed at which reactions occur, assessing a significant volume of reactive material and disposing of carbonate material, and measuring total carbon impact and improving economics. All those things are important. There is a need for a lot of pilot projects scaling up to demonstration scale in order to make this a real pathway. Very importantly, NEDO was already supporting a very important project on this, and we thank NEDO for its vision and leadership in doing that. This is a project on calcium carbonate circulation systems, and this slide explains the project. This is exactly the type of project that needs to happen dozens, scores of times around the world in the years ahead, we believe. Our second recommendation: policymakers should add mineralization of carbon to the portfolio of climate change mitigation options. That includes a number of different steps. Critically, incentives should be provided. Those could be tax incentives, those could be grants. It could also be recognizing carbon mineralization as a compliance option in emissions trading programs, as Dr. Friedman just said. Today, there is no place in the world where your carbon mineralization will help you get a credit. So I think that's right. Is that? Yep. No place we're aware of that you can use carbon captured in a mineralization project as a compliance option. That needs to change. We should streamline regulatory processes while protecting public health and safety. Right now, the regulatory processes can really slow down the development of these projects. Doing that in ways that ensure that public health and safety is protected is really important. Procurement preferences could make a big difference. Governments buy lots of concrete, lots of cement. Procurement preferences for products made from carbon mineralization could make a big difference in helping to create this market. There's lots of opportunities to create jobs in mining and industrial communities. And we specifically propose launching an initiative under the Clean Energy Ministerial as part of this work. Our last two recommendations deal with companies, not governments. Mining companies and manufacturers should seek opportunities for carbon mineralization in their exploration and production activities. This is a natural for any mining company that has a net zero commitment. This is a natural for any iron and steel company that has a net zero commitment. It's a natural for any company that produces waste with any alkalinity, and they should immediately start looking at these opportunities. Obviously, they should start by reducing emissions in their own operations. That's the most important thing. But then for any residual emissions, this type of offset could make a big difference. And then finally, really any company with net zero commitments should consider carbon mineralization as part of their portfolio. As I just said, start by reducing your own emissions. That's what's important, most important. But then, to the extent that that is difficult or impossible over time, offset those emissions with sequestration in carbon mineralization projects or similar. We offer, I won't go into detail on these slides, but we offer in our report a roadmap, specific images. So we have three sections: policy and standards, fundamental and applied RD&D, and corporate leadership. And we look at recommendations in the near term, medium term, and long term as part of this.
David, could you go back one slide so people can take pictures?
I sure could. Here, I'll pause for a minute on that one. And that, and that. So just in conclusion, to wrap it up, carbon mineralization is a process in which carbon dioxide becomes bound in rocks as a solid mineral. It's the basics. It could help remove many gigatons of CO2 from the atmosphere each year. We estimate that with strongly supportive policies, 1 gigaton of CO2 could be removed per year by 2035 and a full 10 gigatons by 2050. The next step is launching dozens of projects worldwide, pilot projects, and policy and corporate leadership are essential. I want to thank NEDO for its support, I want to thank the co-authors of this report, really some of the world's leading experts on this topic. Peter Kellerman, Roger Ains, Colin McCormick, Brianna Schmidt, Ian Power, and Sasha Wilson, along with Dr. Julio Friedman and I. It's been a great team, and this report will be available on the ICEF website within the next day or two. Please go to the ICEF website, and we'll distribute it in a number of different ways as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Sandel and Dr. Friedman, for the enlightened findings and recommendations of the new ICEF roadmap. This concludes the roadmap launching event. And let me go back to the session one. Now technical problem has solved, so now we can have the video message from the Mr. Tanaka, chair of the ICEF
Thank you for
committee
inviting
meeting.
me to share the results of the ICEF 2021. I am Nobuo Tanaka, the chairman of the steering committee of the ICEF. Since 2014, government of Japan has annually hosted a global conference called Innovation for Cool Earth Forum, ICEF, in Tokyo. ICEF is aimed at providing a global platform to promote discussion and cooperation among international leading figures in order to address climate change through innovation of energy and environmental technologies, including their dissemination. ICEF in 2021, which was held as a part of Tokyo Beyond Zero Week, discussed concrete and realistic pathways toward carbon neutrality by 2050. From the perspective of innovations in policy, business, and individuals, as well as technologies such as nuclear and negative emission. ICEF considers net negative technologies like DACs are very important, as they are often called backstop technologies. Last year, we picked up bikers, the biomass carbon removable and storage. This year, we picked up carbon mineralization. It has potential of removing 10 gigaton per year by 2050. The IEA triggered so-called IEA shock among oil and gas producers by its publication of Net Zero by 2050 roadmap, because it is understood that energy groups must stop all new oil and gas exploration projects from this year. In its roadmap, 7.6 gigaton of carbon dioxide be captured by 2050. We need 435 million tons of low carbon hydrogen with 3,000 gigawatt electrolyzers by 2045. DACs and BECs are called backstop technologies, as I said, because their future costs will be the ceiling of carbon price. IEA estimates 2 gigatons of carbon dioxide be stored by these technologies. Bikers, feedstocks are available for 2.5 to 5 gigaton, while carbon mineralization for 10 gigaton carbon dioxide removable annually by 2050. It may add substantial amount to the IEA calculation. Former Prime Minister Suga of Japan announced carbon neutrality by 2050 last year. METI followed it up with the energy outlook toward 2050. First, decarbonize totally power sector. Second, electrify consuming sectors, and the remaining fuels be supplied by hydrogen and so forth. The third, use CCUS and carbon removable. Bikers and carbon mineralizations can be added. Hydrogen and carbon removal are the key for Japan's carbon neutrality. Energy transformation will be an opportunity for the green economic growth. Japan's green growth strategy for 14 sectors cover a lot of hydrogen application. A golden age of hydrogen may come if supply chain of clean hydrogen being established. Japan started liquid natural gas business model 50 years ago by importing LNG from Alaska. Now, Japan is aiming at building the clean hydrogen supply chain with liquid hydrogen, ammonia, and organic hydrate. Last year, ICEF focused gender balance because climate change is not gender neutral. More than half of the panelists at ICEF this year are women. ICEF 2021 focuses young generation because they are indeed impacted by the climate change by 2050. In that sense, climate change is not generation neutral. ICEF 2021 invited the younger generation to all the panels. They contributed to the discussion with new ideas. They urge policymakers and CEOs to trust them and hear their voices seriously. For example, the nuclear sector. ICEF endorses flexible nuclear concept with advanced system and technology. This year, one of the young panelists, Dr. Aditi Belma, proposed reimagining nuclear engineering with design justice by engaging local community from the design phase of reactors. Ladies and gentlemen, you can watch all the recorded videos of all ICEF 2021 sessions on our official YouTube channel. And please enjoy that, and please join us next year. Now, let me pass the floor to David Sandalo for Carbon Mineralization Roadmap. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Tanaka. Next, I would like to move on to session 3, panel discussion with the theme industrial, governmental, and academic initiative to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050. First, I would like to introduce the moderator of this session, Mr. David Sandalo. Thank you for coming back to this panel. We have an excellent speakers for this session. There are Dr. Julio Friedman and Mr. Julio Lipponen, as coordinator of the Clean Energy Ministerial CCUS initiatives. He gave us a video message. Then Dr. Tomoko Suzuki, Corporate Chief Researcher, Environmental Project Leader, and Aldin Group Hitachi, and myself, Wada, Executive Director of NEDO. I would like to ask Mr. David Sandalo to moderate this session. Mr. Sandalo, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Should I speak from here? Yeah, can you hear me? Great. Thank you. Let me invite the other panelists. Our first speaker in this session is going to be Dr. Friedman. Dr. Friedman is very popular and has another speaking engagement in a few minutes. So thank you for staying very much, Dr. Friedman. He's going to offer some remarks, and then unfortunately he's going to have to leave. Dr. Friedman.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Can everybody hear me? All right, okay, number 6, there we go. Excellent, thank you. And thank you again for the opportunity to share some thoughts now. I'm sorry I have to leave. I wish I could stay longer. I have not yet mastered mitosis someday.
Mr. Sanderson, Mr. Sanderson,
I wanted to talk just a bit on this theme, industrial, academic, governmental partnerships. We've done a lot of work actually looking on deep decarbonization of industrial systems. And it shouldn't come as a surprise, this is very hard. It is very hard, and there's two reasons why. One, there's very few options, and it's very expensive. If you have only a few options and it's expensive, it's hard politically, it's hard operationally. So if you really want to get into it, there's only a few things you can do. Hydrogen, low carbon hydrogen can decarbonize these industries. Carbon capture and storage is a good way to decarbonize a lot of industry. Biomass is a way to decarbonize the industries if it's sustainable. And electrification, because if you have clean electricity, you can then electrify processes. As I said, our own assessment of this, and I'm happy to point you to resources, not only our ICEF Roadmap and industrial heat, but recent reports we've written at Columbia University on the same topic. We published a paper on Joule, for example, on decarbonizing the steel industry. It's just very hard and very expensive. That's still the work, so what do? And the answer is you do partnerships. If you want to actually make it easier, you start working with people who can help you. One example of that was actually something that was brought here as part of Secretary Kerry's agenda, the First Movers Coalition. The First Movers Coalition are 8 companies which have agreed to start buying these things and paying for clean. And if you double the price of steel, the price of a car only goes up 2%. If you double the price of concrete, the price of a bridge goes up 1%. It's just not that much money in the end case. But if you have a supply chain and you have contracts from the first movers, then you can start to get these things into the market and start reducing the cost. Another example of something you can do, what actually was in Tanaka-san's presentation. If you start building out supply chains for hydrogen, then you can actually let the market reduce the cost and also set the standards for what constitutes clean fuels. And we want to make sure that the fuels are clean. Buyers and sellers can do that. They can start to create the standards which then governments can adopt. With respect to academic collaboration, there is simply no limit to this. I have learned as a professor, as a researcher, as an academician, a very important thing. And this is a quote from the former Secretary of Energy, Stephen Chu. He said, "You cannot herd the cats, but you can move the feed bowls." And what this means is if you give researchers a little bit of money to work together, they will work together. I want to point to one example actually that has just begun at Columbia University yesterday. So quite recently, we launched in partnership with NYSERDA, the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority, a carbon tech foundry to create technologies and companies that will turn CO2 to fuels, building materials, and will pull CO2 from the air and oceans. This is good because it creates collaboration not only with researchers in Columbia, but across the state of New York, in partnership with entities like the Port Authority of New York, who could buy the fuels that we make as first movers, and with companies like Suzuki or Mitsubishi, which are interested in these CO2 recycling technologies. That is also an opportunity for exchange. We announced this with the Danish Pavilion, because in fact the government of Denmark is very interested in these technologies. I know for a fact that the government of Japan is also very interested in these technologies. There's probably some way to imagine this. And of course there's a more formal platform for such things, Mission Innovation, which was launched at the Paris COP, just in COP21, as a multinational platform. On carbon utilization today, the leaders are Saudi Arabia, Canada, and the United States. Well, there's 26 countries in Mission Innovation. That's a pretty good place to start. Last but not least, I want to talk briefly about partnerships, quite briefly. Specifically, partnerships are the work of the 21st century. I'll say it again, partnerships are the work of the 21st century. First and foremost, easy way to partner, cheap, fast, easy, human capital. We do not have enough people in these fields. We do not have enough people making clean hydrogen. We do not have enough people doing industrial decarbonization or CO2 removal or carbon mineralization or any of this. This is an opportunity where companies, where governments, where academia can work together within their own countries to build the human capital their nations need. And that creates an opportunity for future negotiators and diplomats and government officials to work with each other in the future. A specific kind of partnership are bilateral partnerships between nations. For example, interesting idea. I just thought of this now, nobody said it before. Perhaps the United States and Japan could work on carbon mineralization. This seems like something which is a good opportunity, and both the United States and Japan have excellent resources, have research programs that are going on today. This seems like a good platform where we could do such things. Similarly, bilateral partnerships can create standards. One of the things we talked about with our bikers report is that buyers and sellers can set the standards for the market. So if Japan is buying biomass and Indonesia is selling biomass, they can set the standards for the market to make sure that it is just, sustainable, and clean. Last, sectoral partnerships. The First Movers Coalition has given an idea between steel producers and steel buyers. But in fact, all the steel makers of the world come together and set standards, create supply chains, and trading opportunities. That Club of Nations approach is a virtuous cycle that I think holds promise and a new way of doing it. I'm grateful for your attention. Turn it back to Mr. Sandelin.
Dr. Friedman, thank you. And we know you have to leave, so you are excused. We want to thank you for joining us. You have a very busy schedule today and throughout the week. So
Yes.
Enjoy your next event. Thank you so much, and thanks for your great contributions to the roadmap.
My pleasure. Thank you again. I'm delighted to be here. Apologies, I have to leave.
And now I'm delighted to turn the floor back to Executive Director Wada-san for additional thoughts.
いいんだっけ
Like to go here?
So let me use the podium to make a presentation. いいセムが先
presentation video from CCUS.
You want to do that before we do that?
Okay, before my presentation, you will see the video message from. Yes.
My apologies. Yeah. First we have a message from the Secretariat of the Clean Energy Ministerial.
Yep.
Hello everyone. My name is Juho Lipponen, coordinator of the Clean Energy Ministerial CCUS initiative, and thank you for inviting our group to say a few words at this event. The Clean Energy Ministerial is a global process to accelerate clean energy deployment, and the SEM CCUS initiative is one of several work streams under this process. We are a group of 13 governments plus other partners who have joined together to accelerate CCUS deployment. We are government-led, but not government-only, so we can collaborate also with industry and the finance sector. We think that carbon capture, utilization and storage in all its forms and applications is extremely important to reach the Paris targets. And in that light, we of course hope that the ongoing COP26 meeting delivers ambitious, tangible and clear steps forward for all countries and industries to follow and implement. Most of the world's economy is now within countries that have announced net zero targets, and a true sense of direction is really emerging. Reaching net zero will require unprecedented efforts by all countries, not least emerging economies, and therefore global collaboration on clean energy deployment has never been this important. We would like to welcome the series of various energy and decarbonization roadmaps that the Innovation for Cool Earth Forum, or ICEF, has developed in the past several years. ICEF has tackled new areas and aspects of decarbonization that are important but require increased attention, such as industrial heat and biomass carbon removal. So thank you for the trailblazing approach. Thank you also for collaborating on a webinar together with us earlier in the year when we jointly presented the biomass carbon removal and storage, or BICER concept. Now, this latest roadmap is about carbon mineralization. It is, first of all, a really well-written document that allows the reader to understand the opportunity that carbon mineralization provides and the challenges it faces. It describes the key processes involved in underground mineralization and also very usefully points to a number of key industry sectors who could be drivers in employing XC2 mineralization techniques, such as mining, iron and steel, fertilizers, and cement and concrete. The roadmap also makes it clear that carbon mineralization deserves more attention by industry, but clearly also by governments. There is positive press about the recent project startup in Iceland, where mineralization is coupled with direct air capture. And this is a winning combination for the planet, but it of course need more and bigger installations to drive the costs down. So we really need to build on recent early successes. Industry and academia have the obvious role to innovate and to find ways to improve mineralization processes and to make them faster. At the same time, there's a clear role for governments to look at mineralization as part of a wider energy, decarbonization and CCUS portfolio. RD&D investment are an obvious way to help, but equally also facilitating the analysis on what role mineralization could play and sharing best practice and providing conducive policy for mineralization projects. The Clean Energy Ministerial CCUS initiative is one platform among several where governments and industry can come together to discuss project progress going forward. Thank you for your attention.
Yes, after the presentation of Mr. Giulio Lipone, I will deliver my presentation. So I will talk about the NEDO's contribution to Japan's carbon neutrality. NEDO is a New Energy and Industrial Technology Development Organization. Is a governmental organization, and it is tackling with. Yeah. This is the outline of this my presentation. So I will briefly talk about the NEDO's missions and what the NEDO is, and also about the NEDO's recent activities. And among all, NEDO is tackling with the international collaborative works. So it is a collaboration between research industries and international forums like ICEF. So I will touch upon those issues. So, NEDO is a governmental organization established in the 1980s and Japan's largest funding agency for technical development as an innovation accelerators. It has two missions: to address energy and global environmental problems and to enhance industrial technologies. It has a $1.44 billion budget into fiscal year 2021, and NEDO's core activity is to help industries R&D projects and demonstration projects in various fields of work. And before the declaration of carbon neutrality of the government of Japan, we already are focusing on how to realize a sustainable society. We created the technical development comprehensive guideline for the realization of a sustainable society. in February 2020. It is to achieve the sustainable society towards 2050. We are focusing on 3 areas of the R&Ds. One is circular economy, the second is bioeconomy, and the third is energy sectors. With these guidelines, NEDO is focusing on its R&D activities. And then I will touch upon about the government trend of the carbon neutrality. In October 2020, the government of Japan declared for carbon neutrality by 2050. And a year later, we created a long-term energy policy plan, strategic energy plan, which describes how the energy policy will be proceed towards the carbon neutrality. And this COP26, Prime Minister Kishida delivered his speech and underlining with the importance of the key technologies like hydrogen and synthetic fuels, and collaboration with Asian developing countries to enabling zero-emission power generation. Responding to those urgent policy needs, NEDO is building blocks with strong technology capabilities. We already established the world-class demonstration project site of the H2 production, utilizing renewable energy from volcanic power generation site in Fukushima, FH2R. And also we are commencing the research about synthetic fuels from CO2 and H2, like ICEF and carbon generated propane and methane. And we already have the CCUS demonstration research site utilizing a coal-fired power system, and its productive CO2 can be utilized as a source of the new carbon recycling research in Osaki power generation site. And NEDO is already also addressing long-term ambitious, sorry. Let me introduce the recent NEDO's carbon neutral activities. Japanese government created a mega fund to address the carbon neutrality issues, named Green Innovation Fund, amounted up to $70.6 billion in last year. NEDO will fund and manage R&D demonstration project which enable the structural innovation from the conventional one to clean energy, from the various sectors, from energy industries and energy structure itself, and then industrial structures. We already commenced 18 projects with aiming at 10 years time frames this year. And the next one, the Moonshot project, is also targeting the long shot, very ambitious technological challenges. It also the funding set to our organization NEDO, aiming 10 years very difficult technical challenge to attain sustainable resource circulation. One of the essays is already mentioned about Dr. Sandro's roadmap presentations, and direct air capturing, recovering of nitrogen compounds, and other very ambitious R&D projects has already commenced under this Moonshot project. Next, I will talk about NEDO's international activity for Joint Credit Mechanism, JCM. JCM is a scheme to encourage further cooperation between developing countries and Japan to reduce greenhouse gases. And Japan provides a leading-edge decarbonizing technology to the partner countries, and partner country implement the energy emission reduction site in their country, and by quantitative measurement, reporting and verification method, those GHG emission reductions gained by this project has been counted as a credit to the partner country and Japan. Totally, with this mechanism, it will contribute to the ultimate objective of the UNFCCC, so global-wide GHG emission reductions. To achieve this goal, we have implemented several demonstration projects. 8 demonstration projects have been completed, and 2 is a pre-demonstration stage project is ongoing in Philippines and Saudi Arabia. And demonstration project 2 are ongoing now in Thailand. Next, I would like to talk about NEDO's international demonstration project. Besides of the GSM project, energy-related technology is sometimes very difficult to implement in the domestic field of Japan. So collaborating with developing and developed countries worldwide, Japan tried to expand its technical capabilities beyond the board. So now we have implementing 11 demonstration projects worldwide, and I am showing 6 of the previous example of the energy demonstration project. You can see how the diversified fields and the countries are included in our project management. Thank you. And finally, I would like to talk about the innovation for the Core Forum ICEF. You already know much about it, but in an international collaboration, we recognize its importance, not only from the viewpoint of the RNG project, but also for the extensive discussions among industry, academia, and government sectors. So facilitating those discussions with various stakeholders, we expect the key innovation to realize the clean energy society. On this year's ICEF, more than 2,000 people from 87 country regions participated and engaged in active discussions. This year's theme titles The Pathway to Carbon Neutrality by 2050, accelerating the pace of the global decarbonization. The keynote session included a dialogue between Mr. Tanaka, chairman of the ICEF Steering Committee, and Dr. Faisal Valor, IEA Executive Director, as well as a dialogue with Mr. Michael Bloomberg, former New York City mayor. In addition, Dr. Patrick Floor, the U.S. ambassador to Japan, attended to the policy session of the ICEF on October 6 to 7. You can watch the recording of the conference from the official ICEF website. Please search for ICEF on the internet and find the website, and you will view the conference videos on your desktop. As one of Japan's largest funding agencies, NEDO will contribute to address global energy and environmental concerns in cooperation with industry and academia. This concludes my presentation. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you you very much, Mr. Executive Director. And now I'm delighted to turn the floor over to Tomoko Suzuki, who's the Corporate Chief Researcher of Research and Development at Hitachi. She has a distinguished academic background, a master's degree of environmental resources at Tokyo University of Agriculture and Technology, and a doctoral degree from Hokkaido University. She's had a very successful and distinguished career at Hitachi. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Suzuki.
Thank you for Mr. Sanderson for kind introduction. I would like to thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak here today. I'm Tomoko Suzuki, Corporate Officer and Corporate Chief Researcher for Hitachi Limited. In today's presentation, I'm hoping to give you Hitachi's vision for carbon neutral future. Under the scenario, which is to limit the global temperature increase to 1.5 degrees Celsius, we have established the goal of realization of carbon neutrality by fiscal 2030 at all business sites, and have established a target to achieve carbon neutrality throughout our value chain by fiscal 2050. And in order to support the discussion on climate change, Hitachi became a principal partner of COP26. We believe there will be 4 pillars supporting the realization of carbon neutrality. By fusing the capability of global logic, features acquired in July with Lumada, we will expand innovative solutions globally. Over the next few slides, I will share a few examples of activities from the 4 pillars.
It's okay, I can just stand right here.
Firstly, let me introduce 2 examples of energy saving by DX. Green energies will increase toward 2050, but they may not always be available when and at the price you want. So we have to look for the optimal solution under the various constraints. Let's show a solution called dynamic headway for railway operators. In Copenhagen, we have demonstrated automatic optimization for train operation on the route where the number of passengers fluctuates due to events held nearby. Based on the sensor data obtained from stations and trains. This solution provides energy saving for railway operators, and for passengers provides comfortable and convenient transportation. Right shows a platform called Slab Smart Hub. In Singapore, building power consumption accounts for more than 50% of the country total. This provides building owners with proposal for appropriate energy-saving technologies and estimates of introduction cost and energy reduction effects by utilizing AI. It has already been used by more than 90 companies since 2019. Next topic is grid solution for mass installation of renewables. Hitachi has been participating in Connect and Manage project in Japan since 2020. For the future grid, we are developing the online power grid control solution to expand power transmission capacity of existing power grid, leveraging the unique risk prediction technology. Regarding local grid, we took part in Smart Grid demonstration project on Maui, sponsored by NEDO. We demonstrated fine-tuned supply and demand adjustment that absorb power fluctuations and surplus power from renewable energy by utilizing EVs as a storage battery. Toward 2050, to build clean and resilient energy system, we are developing a platform to coordinate consumer-side equipment, including EVs, and supply-side equipment by utilizing data with trust in collaboration with the University of Tokyo and various partners. Next is the third pillar, electrification. Hitachi developed all SiC inverter in 2019 for the drive system of Japanese high-speed railway for the first time in the world. For railways in non-electrified sections, we are developing hybrid system of fuel cell and storage battery with customer. As for EVs, we released a gearless drive system, direct electrified wheel, in October. This reduced energy loss by 30% and increased the distance traveled on a single charge. Regarding the charging infrastructure, we announced a new multiple port EV charging technology that can switch between quick charging and multiple charging, mainly to meet the needs for quick charging in urban areas. Through this technology, we aim to achieve both the penetration of green mobility and comfortable transportation. Lastly, let me introduce hydrogen solution and area energy management system. We are developing a hydrogen co-firing power generation system to produce low carbon heat. We have demonstrated a technology that optimally controls the engine according to changes in the fuel consumption using AI. And licensure, we built a demonstration environment in which various assets such as cogeneration system, solar power generation, and storage batteries are connected by a DC microgrid. We have started to provide it to our customers as a place for demonstration experiments from October. From here, I would like to introduce two initiatives in collaboration with academians. Hitachi and Kyoto University have developed the unique AI that generates tens of thousands of scenarios and extracts important turning points from them. The feature is that AI does not inductively predict from the current big data, but predicts the future with high uncertainty through collaboration between human and AI. In the Lightbox simulator to evaluate and visualize the effect of specific measures and policies is shown. For example, the amount of CO2 reduction, electricity fee, and indicators related to QOLs, such as the set temperature of air conditioners, can be evaluated. We believe that this will contribute to accelerate consensus building and decision making among stakeholders. The other example is the activities about describing transition scenario for carbon neutrality. Collaboration with the University of Tokyo. Based on the interviews with various experts and dialogue with actors from private sector, academia, and government, we are describing behavioral transformation and various domains and actors. And we hope to accelerate the conversation between stakeholders toward a just transition by widely introducing these scenarios. Hitachi Group is building an open innovation ecosystem for environmental and digital technology to drive the realization of a carbon neutral society. We look forward to working closely with the technology communities and the stakeholders to realize this goal for humanity and growth. Thank you for your attention.
There's so much I want to ask you about your presentation, and we don't have the time to do it. But I know one topic that's of great interest to people around the world is in the transportation sector, and you talked about that. And could you just elaborate, say another word about what you're working on with respect to battery electric vehicles and hydrogen electric vehicles, and how you think that those technologies will help us transition from fossil fuels?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think you can.
Yes. Yes. The transportation system. Now, right now we our trains operating in the UK, and we have many expertise in the train systems, and we promoting the more environmental friendly train system into the globally, expand globally. So for that we are developing the more clean driving system for train and EVs. So we are working on this topic more tightly.
Okay, thank you. Well, I want to thank again NEDO for organizing this excellent event. I want to thank NEDO for its support of our roadmap and the entire roadmap series. For anybody interested in the roadmap in more detail, all 78 pages, I think, are going to be available on the ICEF website within the next day or two. Please go to the ICEF website, and we will also distribute it in a number of other ways as well. And with that, I want to turn it over for closing comments to Executive Director Wada.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Sando. So everyone who participated in this event, we are reaching the final of the ICEF2021 pathway to carbon neutrality by 2050 with a roadmap launching event. I hope we could deliver many beneficial key messages to you, and how we Japanese government, industry, and academia are tackling to address climate change issues. I truly hope this event the fruitful opportunity to learn about our latest technological development and innovation activities. So totally with this effort, we are aiming to attain the carbon neutrality by 2050. Thank you for participating in sessions, and see you next time.